Hi there, and welcome to One Idea Away, not just a podcast, but a community and ongoing conversation meant to inspire and empower individuals to live more fully, deeply, and consciously. Let's jump into today's episode right now. Finding meaning, creating the good life, answering the big questions of what is the purpose of all of this? Who are we? Why are we here? Well, to quote the great philosopher, Jimmy Buffett, these are the questions that bother us so. In all seriousness, I hear these questions and pursuits more often than ever before. Perhaps it's the crazy uncertain times that we live in, or the attendance at service for so many of the world's major religions is down. Maybe it's that people are just less engaged and less happy at work than ever before. Maybe it's just a bad case of heartburn from all the processed and fried food. I don't know. But what I do know is that these questions continue to be out there. They continue to linger. And I love being able to bring on guests who can deepen our reflections and at times even add a little light to our journeys. So today, we're going to draw on philosophy, spirituality, and religion and see what the old books and messages can offer to today's world. So to understand these issues, to dive into these big questions that bother us so, we searched far and wide so that we could bring you a nobody. Just hang on there for a moment. You'll understand in just a second. J.A. Plosker is our guest today. He's not rich, famous, or ordained. And after 2 degrees in religion and advanced degrees in social work and the law, he's still the same guy he always was. And he's recently discovered that's where true happiness lives. J.A. spent years teaching comparative religion and philosophy to university students looking for answers to life's most difficult questions, as well as earning some easy humanities credits. Since everybody was asking these questions and he was searching for the answers as well, he decided to publish the Nobody Bible, uncovering the simple wisdom in ordinary life. It's an award-winning book that takes readers on a journey through the ancient wisdom and reveals that the keys to a more fulfilling life and true self-discovery are available in the little things we do every day. I think you're getting a sense of why I wanted to have him on the show. He's been in social work. He's been a counselor. He's helped those in need of support. He's currently a writer by profession, and he lives in the southwestern United States, paying a mortgage and mowing a lawn that sounds a lot like my own. It's full of crabgrass. So with that, J.A., welcome to One Idea Away.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So off the bat, I have to say that one of the more enlightening things that I learned from reading the Nobody Bible is that you are an admitted lover of 80s music. And so I hate to ask you the tough questions out of the gate, but I got to know, what's one of your favorite songs from the 80s?
Well, Tears for Fears is probably my favorite 80s band, so I'd probably have to go with Everybody Wants to Rule the World.
They are a classic.
Love that song, and I think I found out he wrote that song in 15 minutes. So that really impressed me. Yes, wow. That was a really interesting tidbit.
That's a nice bit of trivia that does add something to the song. I like that.
Yeah, when you're inspired, you're inspired.
Absolutely. I didn't know because there's Rick Springfield and Bruce Springsteen, and don't forget Tommy Tutone and John Mellencamp when he was still a cougar. I mean, all sorts of stuff, right? Yep. Anyway, I am curious. You name the book the Nobody Bible. And I was wondering if we could start there of why the Nobody Bible.
Well, nobody is one of those strange concepts out there. It has a really negative connotation. And when I was working with clients as a social worker, when I was working with students, a lot of times people were asking, really big questions, and then they would kind of be seeking some answers, and they'd say, well, I don't know anything about philosophy or religion. I can't explore all that. That's really complicated. And the message that kept coming across was really this idea of, who am I to look into this? Who am I? I'm a nobody. And when I started looking into the writing field, started looking to publish books, I kind of had the same reaction. I found myself walking around in bookstores. I was searching these questions and writing and thinking, how am I ever going to get a book out there? I'm nobody in particular. Who's going to want to read this? And then a few years after that particular experience in the bookstore, I heard a teaching by a really influential teacher in my life, and he said, in the spiritual world, being nobody is really the highest you can be. That's really what you're striving for, because no body, no thing is really talking about being on that path of really getting past the ego. And that struck me like a bolt of lightning. And I realized that this little term that sort of had a negative spin on it was actually something very powerful. And I started to explore that concept more and more. And when I wrote the book, I realized that I was writing a nobody's Bible. This was these were the cornerstone teachings that I had loved and used from my learning, and they became my Bible. And so I empowered the term and turned it on its ear. So that's the short story of where that term came from.
That's interesting because it also plays off of, you even mentioned to be no thing. One of the concepts, certainly within Buddhism, that I had misunderstood for years was this idea of being nothing. And I always thought of it as being nothing. Why would you? I don't get that, being nothing. Don't we want to be full and all this other stuff? Until one day, exactly as you just described in terms of nobody, somebody had used it as a lesson to say, it's not nothing, it's no thing. Remember what this is actually. And it is really about moving past the ego and to surrender in such an extraordinary way. And so I guess that's one of the things that I'm very interested in what I was reading and everything else, was that there seemed to be, while you drew some uniqueness from each religion and philosophy that you share within the book, there also seems to be some underlying tenets that a lot of them share. And this idea of whether it be surrender or to be no thing, to be no body, seems to be something that's inherent in many of them. And I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit more to some of those common themes that actually run through the religions. Because there's more universal messages there, and we don't usually think about that when we look at the different religions and spirituality, as it were.
Well, right. So, when we talk about common themes, it's we don't ever want to start this conversation with the message that all religions are the same. I think sometimes those ideas get conflated, and I know that's not what we're saying. But I always like to preface with that, because one of the beautiful things about studying and teaching religion and writing about it is that you're really taking these spoked, it's the spoken wheel, the spoken center. You're really taking all these wonderful, unique, different paths to I might say it's like a similar destination. This idea of personal growth. So some of the themes that I noticed coming across, we'll just start with the biggest one, is this theme of love. Now, we can quibble in modern times about what that really means, how that manifests itself through the practice of religion. But if you're really looking at these traditions, just, taking a surface look at them, you kind of see that there's this road to something that we may think of it like respect for elders, or we may think of it like respecting the group, or we may think of it like coming right out and saying love your neighbor. But really, all these different terms are really about love, in my opinion. When I think about the 10 Commandments and I think about respect your mother and father, that should come from a place of love. Right. When I think about motifs of balance, when I think about submitting to a creator, all of those things I think in some way are really about love. And so I don't know if that came across to you.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I was just kind of jotting down some of the words you were using and some of the words that had stuck out to me that I saw as central to these different religions and traditions. And it's interesting, actually, the connection between all of them is certainly love. You start with love, but then to look at things like kindness, compassion, and service. Right. Well, they're all just different manifestations, right? Of love, and they're different ways of representing. And so it really is truly interesting. I mean, obviously, and I think this was one of the other interesting things that you pointed to, is how probably more so than ever, individuals are almost learning from multiple traditions and religions. It seems a bit different. I was curious if we could speak a little bit of from that regard of what do you think it is that's drawing us to not look only in one path, but to look at several and see what we glean from that?
Well, look, there are many. You have your personal development communities, you have your spiritual communities, you have your academic communities, you have your business communities. All of these communities would probably give you a different answer to why that is. But we can kind of jump to maybe the most obvious could be, the advent of social media, the advent of the internet. I mean, this theme is everywhere. The world really is getting closer. When you build a platform or you build a social media presence and you reach people, these days, you're not necessarily just reaching people in your local community. You could put a post up on a local blog and it can be seen by people anywhere immediately. Well, when you realize things like that, I think there's a natural curiosity that develops, and ideas are no longer contained. Everything, you can Google yoga and have 1,000, 1,000,000, hundreds of millions of articles immediately. And that kind of quick education, that kind of quick connection, I think in some ways is driving people to look for new ways of being spiritual, new ways of being religious. And these religions in a lot of ways feel that, they need to evolve. They need to accommodate these things sometimes in their services. Well, when you accommodate meditation in your service, people go home and look up more and they want to know more. And I think closeness of the world, curiosity that can now have an outlet through things like Google, I think that really drives a lot of this. I think a lot of it comes from that.
Well, certainly it does make things more accessible than ever before. And we can begin to, and not only is it accessible, I think because we can also then see it from so many different voices, right? Like you said, we can go find the 100 million articles that are out there on yoga, but we can find the voices that help make it accessible to us. If, one author puts it away that we don't understand it, fine, go find another author on the same subject and you may see it differently. So
exactly.
There are a lot of different ways to pull it in. A couple of the terms that you used, and I think this was another interesting distinction to draw, because I know I've talked about it on the show, I've probably said the exact same words of, wait, I'm more spiritual than religious. Right. So I was wondering if you could make that distinction of what, what have you found, what have you seen certainly in that distinction of spirituality and religion? Well, for me, and I always have to preface that with, well, for me, because, everybody's going to have it's a 7 billion spoked wheel. So for me, for my spoke, the idea that there's a subjective, there's an inner world of experience that people, maybe people feel like that's where the connection lives. So people don't necessarily go to church, go to synagogue and feel that the rituals, the outside, the objective rituals they're seeing, maybe they don't feel that those outside rituals are really helping them to get closer to that source. So maybe searching for an inner connection. Now, some people do. Some people find great spiritual meaning in external ritual. Of course, it's beautiful. But it's the inner world. It's the idea that I am going to find what is truly authentic and meaningful to me on my search by going inward and making that personal connection, by touching what's personal inside of me instead of necessarily looking to what's outside of me. But, in the book, I make the point that, like I just said, you can find tremendous personal spiritual meaning in external ritual. Yes. So I don't really think that the two things have to be mutually exclusive. But I think when someone says that, a lot of times that alerts me to the fact that they're doing a very intensely personal internal search, and that's where they feel that the tools for that search will reside subjectively inside. So much of what we do from week to week on One Idea Away are explore different ideas and insights and stories that I can tell you have personally and professionally affected my own life, my own career. I also know that these are the ideas and the insights that have affected many others, people that I've worked with, from actual direct clients of mine to coaches that I know that are out there that are doing this work, to obviously the work and the stories that so many of our experts and guests share right here on the show. And so we've begun some new things new developments inside of the One Idea Away community. And you might be missing out on some of these added reflections and insights that we've been doing, as well as some of the deeper conversations we're getting into. So if you are not presently receiving our email messages, or if you're not part of our private Facebook group conversations, then I'm going to ask you to get involved so that you're not missing out on some of the weekly momentum building reflections and questions that we keep throwing out, some of the inspiration and encouragement of the community, because there's really nothing like having somebody in your corner while you're trying to make some of these types of changes. We've even begun some regular live streaming so that we can go deeper into these topics. Just go over to oneideaaway.com/join to get involved. Now, don't worry, it's free. Just jump on in at oneideaway.com/join. It's part of our mission at One Idea Way to take these insights, the wisdom that's gained, and begin to use them so that we can springboard to live more fully, deeply, and consciously. As I said, these are the ideas and insights that have changed my own lives and the lives of so many more. And if you want to know how exactly, if you want to know how you can begin to tap into some of these ideas and make those shifts within your life, well, do me a favor. Just go over to oneideaway.com/join, get on the email, stop in the side of the community, and please come ask me. I would love to have that conversation with you, as well as get you involved to make whatever changes, whatever shifts in your life you're looking to make. Because at the end of the day, it just takes one idea for us to really start to uncover what this life can be all about for us. Thanks for dropping in, and enjoy the rest of the episode. That is interesting, because I think it's really whatever it is that helps prompt that inner connection or strengthen that inner connection for you. If if you find it within some of the rituals that happen to take place at a location, church, synagogue, temples, and what have you, then that's part of what helps you with the connection. If it's out in nature, that helps you with the connection. If it's at home on a cushion, that's what helps you with the connection. And I think it was interesting because even as you started to share what some of those various traditions were from the different religious and spiritual practices, I think that one of the notions that was really interesting to me, because I don't think I've connected to this in a while, and I guess this is why I'm sharing it for everybody out there, is that in reviewing and understanding a bit more about all of the world religions, and even though I've done some of the study, it was such a wonderful way to be able to recapture some of what I've learned in the past, as well as some new nuances and distinctions. And you revisit this idea of devotion, which I think is really interesting, because I don't know how much we hear about that topic of devotion in today's times. And so I was wondering if, I saw it pop up within some of the yogic traditions in Hinduism. I saw that pop up within the discussion of Islam. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what devotion is and what that may mean to us today.
Well, let's jump right to a second word that we might be able to use,
Sure.
which is discipline. So anytime you have a practice that is, we all want to start, many people want to start a practice. It could be anything. It could be you want to spend more time in the vegetable section of the supermarket. You want to eat better. You want to really get that meditation practice going, or there's a class you want to take. Yeah. Devotion. So in the ancient language, you might say, well, that's devotion. That's giving yourself over to that practice in a very committed way. Today, we might think about that as discipline. Mm-hmm. So anytime I see those kinds of practices going on, I think of discipline. So here's how that looks. So in some traditions, there may be a godly figure that for you really represents the universe, that really represents true connection. So every morning, maybe you make that offering. Every morning, true devotion. Maybe when you reach a time of difficulty, you stop and say a prayer to that personal figure. Maybe in the evening before you go to bed, you say a thank you to that figure. The things that unfold in your life, good or bad, positive, negative, even if they don't even have those connotations, it's how we perceive them. That figure becomes a touchstone. You give yourself over to that figure in a very, very committed way. And so like we just said, in modern times, we might think of that more as discipline. So you give yourself to a practice. You roll out of bed, and before you turn on your computer, you take 5 deep cleansing breaths. You might do that in a very, very disciplined way. So I think of devotion as giving yourself over to an idea, giving yourself over to an ideal, over and over and over again to create a sense of meaning, to create a sense of progress, to create a sense of peace. So that's how I like to update it and think of it in modern times. If I were in a therapy session or I were working with someone around that idea, I would try to work that framework of discipline as a way of cultivating a really, really healthy type of habit.
And exactly, I mean, as you said before, the use of that key phrase of "for me," all of these things are helping. Everybody has to take a look at this as what is the worst for you, whether it be the rituals and the routines that are there, the words even that you use. Because I'll even share for myself, so for me, what spoke with reintroducing, I guess, to me, reintroducing that word devotion, is that if I look at the word discipline, I think of that much more from a mental model or a willpower type of model.
Right.
And for me, the connection to devotion is that this is something that's heart drawn. So when you give yourself over, it seems like you're giving it over from a different part of your being, not just something, I really need to do this, right? So there's just a different type of connection for me in how I look at those words and those concepts. So I think it's unique to each. And I think that was another thing that was really intriguing to me, that you raised this idea of how all of our journeys are, whether they be religious, whether they be spiritual, whether they be the cheeseburger in paradise, since I have Jimmy Buffett on the mind. All these journeys are absolutely personal. And so for us to judge each other based on what the religious or the spiritual practices are is a really kind of self-defeating in a sense.
Yes. What you said before brings up the discipline and devotion, brings up a very interesting point. There's a story in Judaism there where there were two brothers. They were both great rebbes of ancient times. And one of them was very charismatic, what you might say devotion, hearts. He would open up a text, and he would immediately, without even reading the text, he would immediately be overcome with this feeling of just complete, like you would say, devotion. The other brother was very disciplined and memorized those texts, knew those texts inside and out. And out of that discipline grew a tremendous sense of love. Yeah. So, yes, discipline can be something very mental, but I've learned over the years that those kinds of mental disciplines done over and over and over foster within us a sense of love, foster within us a true sense of devotion, because when we lift a weight over and over and over, we really appreciate the muscle that grows there. And that comes, that devotion to the gym can be built from the discipline of going. So I really wanted to make sure that point was clear.
That's a key one. And, it's interesting because I'll even use the reference of myself and my business partner at IPEC, the coach training school that we run. He's an individual that is much more inspired, intuitive. He draws a lot of the wisdom in what it is that he commits from a very different experiential type of a place. Right. And that's how he accesses it. Traditionally, for myself, I was much more out of the kind of that mental model, meaning that it was discipline, it was seeking, it was researching, it was trying to figure things out, but yet it led to a very, very similar place. Right. It yielded something, very, very deep for me that is a very different form of connection that I have today. So yet again, we all have a different journey. We all have a different path to take, and whatever is most natural to us, lean in there. Start there, see where it goes. Right. And so that's what I think is then unique, coming back to the other point of being very mindful of how we judge others' practices. Right. Right? Because I think that's we can give any of the psychological reasons for why we want to do that and what that means and everything else, but it's just something for us to be very, very aware of, because that's also one of the other things that I certainly see in different elements of these different traditions, is how to use your understanding to bring people together, to foster connection and understanding, not to make other, not to separate. And I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit even further to some of the things that you've seen in terms of how there's a part of these religions maybe that don't get emphasized in the news, don't get emphasized in the popular stratosphere that's out there, cybersphere that's out there, that really are about communion and not just within communion of your own faith.
Well, look, if we think of religion just in one area, so we can say things are divinely ordained, and that's a good discussion, but we can also look at religions as things that people build, okay? So if people are involved, then people are involved. And necessarily, even thousands of years down the line, we realize that there are common cores, like we talked about before, that can build bridges of understanding. So I was running a group around the book, And somebody in the group had said, wow, I never realized, I didn't even know that XYZ was a religion. And I was like, oh,
Right.
yeah. And I said, well, and we had this long discussion. And she said, well, I didn't realize that it had so much in common with my religion.
Yeah.
Well, instead of focusing on what the news had to say or what some, fourth party down the road had to say about the tradition, she decided to explore it on her own. And what she realized is that the core concepts of friendship and respect were very, very central concepts to things that she had been working on in her own tradition. So the reason we go to these cores isn't to oversimplify religion. The reason we go to these cores is because these are things we can attach to. So there's ideas of balance, ideas of love, ideas of discipline, ideas of charity, ideas of purity, whatever that means to you. Once we can touch on these concepts and take them out into the wider world, we increase our personal vocabulary, and that allows us to speak the language of our neighbor. Once we're speaking a common language, we can reach any height. So that's one of the reasons why it's important, at least in my view, to look at religions sometimes through a very narrow lens, because then we can really focus in on what can build those bridges. So those were some of the concepts I had found as I was studying. I was like, wow, these are things I'm working on. I didn't realize other people were working on it like this.
Well, and it was interesting because what I also was realizing, and I think you summarized it very, very well there, is this idea of the more that I understand the things that we have in common, what some of those shared tenets and core happen to be, the more I also appreciate the differences.
Right.
And I don't know why that is. It just seems like that was, something that came out of it for my exploration of some of this as well. One of the other, so you used a phrase in there of taking it into the wider world, and that's also part of what I wanted to bring up in our conversation today, because it's not just to look at the view of these different traditions that occurred 2000 and were founded 2025 26 2800 years ago, right? But it was also to figure out what is their place and relevancy and use in today's world. And so I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to how are things evolving, how are things changing or are being accommodated so that we can bring these understandings into today's understanding.
Well, I think as we before you were talking about, we had this discussion around people learning more, the world coming closer. And I think a lot of what's happening is people are looking for a lot more meaning, a lot more relevance. So when I was writing the Nobody Bible, I took a look at it and I said, all right, I've heard a lot of students and I've heard a lot of clients say that religion wasn't something they weren't into. They didn't think it really had any value to add. So what I would do is I would bring them to conversations of things about their traditions that they remembered, from the last time they were there. And people would say things like, oh, the 10 Commandments. And I'd say, oh, that's interesting. Like, yeah, but who really ever? I'm like, all right, well, now hold on. Yes, I understand that these are very ancient, very old. But if we take a look at the moral principles that are being talked about, really they're applicable to modern times. Respecting mother and father doesn't necessarily mean you have to, build monuments to them. And I'd say, did you send your mom a Mother's Day card? Right. Oh, well, no. I said, well, you mentioned in some sessions that you were looking to make that connection with your family again. What if you picked that tenant for this month? This is the one you're going to work on. So I would find things in these ancient traditions, or I would draw the yin-yang on the board. And I'd say, what does this mean? People would say, oh, that's good and bad. I'd say, look again. And that would generate a discussion of if I had a client who was struggling with addiction, or I had a client who was struggling with severe anxiety, I would walk them through a discussion of the yin-yang and how it really isn't good versus bad. It's really about a perspective of balance. So these ancient things have immediate relevance today, which is why we still, people tattoo that yin-yang on their body all the time as a reminder of what it means to them. So that's how I think of this. I'm not writing this book so that you'll run out and pick a religion. I'm writing this to show you that right in the events of your ordinary day, you are living out ancient wisdom. Yeah. You are living it out.
It's present there. And I think what I was also drawing then from so much of this, which is then how to me how I see so much of this in the everyday. I even think of things we teach in some of our programs, or we call them foundation principles, which are exactly the types of things that you're describing, of how can you take these principles, this wisdom, try it on, wrestle around with it, get to understand it and the relevance that it has to you today, and then decide what place is it going to hold within your life.
Right.
And to me, what that's forming and what this is kind of creating the conversation around is how intentional have we each been in creating our own life philosophy.
Yeah.
And that's part of what, to me, and I'm kind of curious for you, but I think that's part of what the Nobody Bible represents for you, is that this drew out a lot of the things that were part of what worked for you, your own philosophy, and how this may be able to support and help others as well. And I think how many of us take for granted the perspective we have in life and really never reflect on and investigate, what do I really believe?
Right.
What is my real philosophy? So I'm curious, what's your thoughts on that to hear that perspective?
We all, whether we know it or not, we all stand for something. Now, whether or not those somethings are truly authentic or not, that's a different discussion. But we all stand for things right now. Even if we sit and watch, TV all day, or we go out on a jog, we jog a 26-mile marathon, and we just kind of tune out to the world, we stand for things. And one of the things I wanted to do with the Nobody Bible is I wanted to educate about the world religions, yes. I wanted to give people, a little insight into that, but I also wanted people to interact with it and force people to think, what are the things that I really stand for? So in some of the chapters I ask, you may not think you have leadership qualities, but you do. Write one here. Well, now, sure, you could skip that question. But I'd be willing to bet that if you sat and thought hard enough about it, you could come up with one time in your life that you led. Or you might ask, where's an area of your life that you need balance? Now, you may be a very rich person and think that your life is da-da-da-da-da and going perfect, but that might make you stop and think, maybe I haven't been a very good friend lately. So the point is, when we're looking to find out what we stand for, we have to be challenged. And what I was hoping to do in the book, at the end of each chapter, there's questions, right? And then those questions you can fill in at the end, and you have your little Nobody Bible of your own. Yeah. I want to force people to take time to look inside, to reflect. Like you said, think about the tools they use in everyday life, write them down, see if they fit. If they don't fit, pick another, and truly come up with a personal philosophy, a personal approach that is the result of reflection, that is the result of personal challenge. I think that's very important, because no matter who we are, we stand for something. And I think one of the great ways to transform or grow is to challenge those beliefs and see if they truly fit, to see if they're truly authentic.
And actually, that's also another really, really great perspective that I want to reiterate then, because this idea of, it's one thing. So the first point is to be very intentional, to make this a conscious exploration for yourself so that you can, understand what is it that you truly believe, what do you want to bring into your life. And then to Jay, the point that you're making, part of the way that we understand that is through challenge.
Right.
Meaning it is, we're going to get out into the world and we're going to bump up against it, or bump up against somebody who doesn't believe that and may really disbelieve what it is that you believe. That's, that's going to happen. There's 7 billion of us, as we remember. But that's also part of you better understanding what you believe, what you stand for.
Right. And
it's also important to then also be able to remember, and it's what that person believes and stands for as well.
Right.
And to see that other perspective. So I guess one of the other things, which I also then tie this down to, as we become more conscious of that philosophy and what it is that we believe and what it is that we stand for, there was a great question. I'm trying to remember now whether it was one of your exercises or it was in one of the passages that it got posed, but it had to do with finding your center. And it had to do, I think, with the idea of equanimity. And so I was wondering, for you, what does that mean to find your center? And how does that help one in life?
Okay, so that's a moving target. Now, I'm going to say that's, even though it's the center, everything's paradoxes, right? So for me, the center could be a moving target. So what that means is the things that come at me in a day change. And I may need to access different tools inside of me to deal with those different things that come at me. So when I think of a center, I'm kind of thinking in myself of a tool belt. There is a tremendous, there's really value. Like downstairs in one of my closets, I have all my tools, right, that I use around here. And it's got nail putty in it. It's got a hammer in it. It's got everything I need. So if something goes wrong around the house, don't panic. The kiddo puts a hole in the wall. Okay, I can fix this. So for me, sometimes in ways of thinking of my center is knowing that I have a set of tools, authentic, simple tools inside of me that I can access to handle the things that happen to me during my day. I can quiet myself down to pick the right tool at the right time by doing things like meditation, by doing things like staying mindful. So what I do is I have a series of practices in my day that I use to try to stay calm and quiet in the face of life's events so that when events do come to me, I can pick the right tool for the job. And I think that's, I don't know if that's something that everybody's going to agree with. But for me, that's how I like to think about it. I like to think about it as a sense of knowing that I have the tools to handle the events of life. And that brings a tremendous amount of calm with it. Mm-hmm. That calm could really be the shining core.
Yeah. Yeah, it brings that calm, and to me, it also brings that kind of that inner confidence as well.
Yes.
Right, I don't need to know all of the answers. I don't have to be able to control all the events and experiences that come around me, but I can have a lot of confidence in the tools that I have, so that whatever comes my way, I know I can handle it.
Yes.
So Jay, I guess then as we begin to kind of bring this conversation around kind of full circle, two kind of wrap up questions. First, I'm curious for you, what is it that's most important for you to connect to every day?
The real core message that I try to take with me, okay? No matter who you are, okay? No matter who you are, the keys to a better life are available right now, right in the events of an ordinary day. Okay? That message every day, I've got jobs and family and books I have things I'm doing. Every day I remind myself, no matter who we are, the keys to a better life are available right now. And that gets me out of bed, gets me set, and gets me to remember that no matter what happens, I can use that event for personal growth. That I remind myself of that every day.
That's one of those things, and even as you just described it as to be able to get out of bed with that thought in mind, it drives a day with intention.
Yep.
And it already sets your radar, your focus, that no matter what it is that's coming here, I know that the keys, the foundation for the better life are being presented to me in all of this circumstance. So it very, very intentional. And interestingly, you started to actually begin the kind of the answer to this wrap up final question that I've got for you. So maybe we can just expand on it. One of the things that I really try to foster as a result of this show is for people not to only get some insight and inspiration from hearing these talks and whatever everybody has to share, but for it to be the beginning of a conversation for them. Right. And I'm curious for you, what is the conversation that you really hope continues from our time together, from people reading your book and your other works and things like that? What's the conversation you want to stir up that you hope people continue on?
I think it is a dovetail of what we said. Here's a conversation you can have with the people you love. Here's a conversation you can have with friends. And here it is. How did you start right here, right now? Today, how did you find meaning in a simple event today? Okay. Now, you don't have to believe that growth or transformation are for one day. One day I'll be able to afford a seminar. One day I'll write that book. How did you connect today? You don't need special credentials. You don't need fame or fortune. You just need to be aware of your day. That's a conversation you can ping your friend every day on a text message. You both sit down at your jobs at 8, and at 8:01 you send each other a text. Well, I don't want to get in trouble from the late. At 7:59 before you clock in, you can text each other and say, remember, whatever happens today, you have to use that. That's the moment.
That's the thing.
We have yoga after work, but from 8 to 5, use yoga.
Yeah.
That's the conversation that goes on, and after we're all gone, it will continue.
Outstanding. J.A., I want to thank you for the work that you're doing in the world and for dropping by on One Idea Way and sharing all the insights and experiences that you have.
Well, thank you. It was a real pleasure.
For everybody, I guess maybe just in terms of where we've already been summing up, I mean, these are some of the best reminders of the entirety of the conversation we've already had, which has been a great one. But it is to begin that day with intention and to recognize that the meaning that you want in life, the transformation you want in life, whatever it is that you're looking to bring out more of and experience more of, it's being presented to you, and the opportunity and the possibility for it is being presented to you in all situations every single day. Begin your day with that intention to be able to see things that way, to experience them that way. Then you will actually be the transforming agent, and transformation is not something that'll happen to you. You'll bring it out. So everybody, do me a favor, check out The Nobody Bible by J.A. Plosker. Once again, I thank you for stopping in on One Idea Way, and as you know, until next time, continue to enjoy the journey. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you really enjoyed it, do me a favor, let us know. You can keep the conversation going and send us a message on our Facebook page, which is simply One Idea Away. Go ahead and tag me in the post or even just direct messages. Also, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this episode along with someone that you believe could benefit from hearing the ideas and the messages that we got into. That's pretty much why we do this. So you can just go ahead and share it from your app or email it along, whatever works for you. The point is to share, to talk, to discuss, and keep the dialogue going, because it's in those conversations that ideas can take hold and create profound shifts in perspective. That's what allows us to live life more fully, deeply, and consciously. As always, we would love to see you post a review for the podcast in iTunes or whichever app you're using. And until next time, remember, you're never more than one idea away from a whole new reality. This is Luke Iorio and One Idea Away, signing off.